There's many questions of the sports universe that we just don't know the answer to. One of the most interesting ones I find is how good is Derek Carr? There's so many wildly different opinions about him. I just found it very fascinating. And so I figured what better way to figure out how good he is than watch every snap he's ever made and then make an incredibly long video about him. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do. This is Jackson Kruger Sports, and welcome to a Derek Carr Deep Dive.
Put him in the dirt, say it again, man, and that's a reverse. Never rehearse, jumping in first. Call up the nurse, put the beat in the hearse. This is absurd, take the berserk. Don't get on the tracks, man, and they better swerve. Don't got a nerve, man, I never curse. Just casting these spells when I'm spelling these words. That's real, that's too real. I've been Roosevelt, I need a new deal. Trying to figure out what I should do still.
There's honestly several things I could go over about Derek Carr as a whole, and so I really figured that there's kind of 8 main things that I want to talk about. First is how he fits in this Jon Gruden style offense. So I figured I'm going to just make a very long video and break down every single thing about Derek Carr. And there's really 8 main things I want to talk about. It's going to be how he fits this Jon Gruden offense, his mid-range throws, his deep ball. I also wanted to get into his footwork and his pocket presence. Is he soft, so to speak? Can he take a big hit? I also think I'll get into his football IQ. I want to talk about his clutch ability. He can be clutch. I want to talk about the lack of receiver talent he's had this past couple of, really the past 2 years especially. And I also want to talk about the losing streak that happened last season and how much of it was his fault. I felt like those 8 topics are really the main things to talk about. One, breaking down Derek Carr. And so, I'm not going to just beat around the bush. Let's get into it. But in order to really talk about how Carr can fit this Jon Gruden style offense, first we have to talk about what this Jon Gruden style offense really is. So I wanted to sort of show how this offense works, and in my opinion, there's no better example of showing how a long, methodical Las Vegas Raiders drive can work, in this case, Oakland Raiders drive can work, than the very first drive of the season against Denver. I thought this was a very, very Jon Gruden style drive. This will be the first play I'll show you. This is just going to be a simple running play. They have a fullback in the game, and what they're going to do is they're going to have their center and their right guard both just block an interior defender. The fullback then moves up to block a linebacker. So basically, number 56 right there, the one who is circled in black, he is going to be the only guy who can run over and make a play, at least unless he, someone else breaks a tackle or something. But he's going to be the closest guy in that area. And watch how, he is eventually able to make this tackle. But you see Josh Jacobs sort of fake as though he's going in one gap, ends up going to a different gap, which helps sort of make 56 think it might be going somewhere else real quick. Just takes a little bit of time for him to make the tackle. Nothing crazy on that play, but they are able to gain a few yards, which is really what the point of this offense is. To gain a few yards on that play. Going to do something a little bit different on this next play. What they're going to do is they're going to have their left tackle, and then also they're going to have a tight end who's in the game. They're kind of going to switch assignments in a sense. They're going to be doing something different than what you would necessarily expect, but not necessarily anything crazy. What they're doing here is, they do this, which kind of just allows for more unique blocking concepts. This can kind of give you a better angle to make your blocks. It can backfire as well, but that's the idea, is to just give themselves a better angle to make this block. They're also going to have their left guard come in to try to get in between. What you're really going to see happen here, though, is that notice 55, how he really wins his one-on-one matchup and is able to try and quickly make a tackle, but it still didn't end up being a disaster for the Raiders. Yes, there was a matchup that did not work out perfectly, but even so, you were able to fall forward, gain a couple, and now it's a 3rd down and 4. So those first 2 running plays now cause a 3rd down. On one hand, a lot of teams view 3rd downs as not a good thing, You don't want to have to face a 3rd down. Ideally, you want to just get the 1st down on 1st or 2nd, but at the same time, it's not that simple. And the Jon Gruden offense is one that doesn't fear 3rd downs, but instead embraces them. Their whole idea, their whole identity is we're going to gain a few yards on 1st down, a few yards on 2nd down, have a 3rd down and short, and we trust that we can convert on those 3rd down and shorts. Now, it gets a little bit more complex than that, and you'll see that, but that is a huge part of their offense. They do not fear third downs, and let's show what happens on this third down, where it's going to be a cover 3 zone now for Denver, and those are the routes that you really want to take a look at. Those two routes, those are the two ones that are going to come into play, because one is a deep route, and the other one is a route going to the outside. So just viewing this typically, you'd think, okay, well, the Denver Bronco, who's in charge of covering the flat on the top half of the screen, which is the zone furthest to the top half of the screen, but in the middle of the field, or middle of the screen, not middle of the field, but towards the sideline in the middle of the screen. And then simply you can have, the other Denver Bronco, who's one zone lower towards the bottom of the screen. He stays with the other Raider, and then he passes him off to a defensive back who is deep. That's what you could do here. But keep in mind, look at how far in all of those Denver players are. Notice how they are all very close in, all prepared for a potential run, because that makes sense here. You would expect the Raiders to potentially run the ball. They just ran the ball in the first 2 plays of the game. And even if they don't run the ball, you could definitely be expecting something short over the middle. So the fact that there's something towards the outside, this is going to actually give them a little bit of an advantage. And watch how right after the ball is snapped, this play does work out pretty well, largely because the Denver Bronco, who was in charge of covering the sideline, was a lot further in than he typically would be, which allowed them to pick up a first down that they maybe wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So they pick up the first down, they move close to their own 40 at this point, and the next play that they're going to be going up against is going to be a man coverage play, and that's going to be the route that Derek Carr wants to throw this ball to. That's the route that really could be good against this type of coverage. But what's interesting here is that on paper, it doesn't look that good. There's a zone in the middle of the field, so you'd think that this isn't necessarily a great thing. But one of the reasons why it is going to be so valuable is it looks like there was a bit of miscommunication on Denver's part, and Derek Carr is going to notice it instantly, because watch how nobody picks up that Oakland player immediately. Nobody picks him up right away. It takes a second, and the reason for that, I believe, is just there was a miscommunication. A Denver player didn't notice it, but you also have to give Derek Carr some tremendous credit on that play, because he very quickly read the play, saw that nobody was covering the guy who should have potentially had 2 guys on him given where he was running. 2 different Denver players thought that they were supposed to be covering that middle of the field and not taking on anybody directly, and that allowed an Oakland player to get wide open. But for a lot of quarterbacks, they would have just not even paid attention to that middle of the field, and they would have just, thrown it somewhere else and not realized that that was open. So you got to give some credit to Derek Carr, some quick thinking right there. We are obviously going to get into his high football IQ or, even some low football IQ moments later on. Obviously, this is quite the long video, so we're going to be definitely getting down to a lot of stuff. But just focusing on the Jon Gruden offense, that's something that can work, is just a lot of middle routes like that, because guys do make mistakes, and that's one way you can take advantage of a mistake. So after this, what they're going to do is they're going to now have a running play where they're going to have their right guard and right tackle have a double team. That's the only double team you'll see right there. And so basically that's the idea. That's where you'd like to run this ball through. But if it doesn't work out, then there's a lot of one-on-one matchups, and you can just sort of pick the hole that you like the best. That's the way that this can work for Josh Jacobs. And as you see, that double team doesn't work out too well, but Jacobs just picks another hole. Again, he's able to fall forward and gain some yards. Is that something that's just spectacular? Not really. But is that something that at least you can look at it and say, okay, well, that helps? I mean, yeah, you got the first down. And it's a lot of runs like that. You'll see a lot of the rushes be plays like that where it's just to gain a few yards, because in this offense, that's the mindset. You have 3 downs to try to pick up 10 yards. If you can gain, 3 yards on a play, 3 yards on a play, and then 4 yards on a play, then you've got it. So that's a lot of really what the Raiders do. That's kind of how this offense works. And now to have the ball past midfield when they can do this play, which is you look down there and you notice that there is a Denver player who's playing pretty far off. He's playing pretty far off of that Oakland player who's running a quick curl route. So for Carr, he's going to quickly realize this. Again, a lot of guys are looking for things down the field. Carr says, I'll take that. I'll throw it very quickly, and we can pick up the first down just like that. Sometimes those quick routes, those, quick decisions can actually even work better than some of these deeper plays. I mean, one broken tackle, and that's going to end up being far more than just a first down. That could potentially be a touchdown, or at least get the ball in the red zone. So without a doubt, a very, very good play from the Las Vegas Raiders. I guess Oakland Raiders. I keep calling them the wrong thing because they're moving, but yeah. So right after that, there was a penalty on Oakland. It was a false start, so that puts them back 5 yards. First down and 15, but for the Raiders, they're not going to be too concerned about that because now you notice right over there, Darren Waller, he was the guy who got the ball earlier. He just got some yards because the defensive back was playing too far off. So now he's saying, okay, no more of that. I'm going to play press coverage. But as you see, Waller is running a go route right here. So again, this is kind of that Jon Gruden one step ahead type mentality of, okay, you just got burned by being too far off. Well, the chances are on the very next play, you're going to make sure you're not too far off. So let's run a go route there, and let's see if we can get you that way. That's the idea. And watch how well it's going to work out. Waller does get relatively open, not too open, but Carr makes a really good throw. They are able to pick up a solid gain. And that's kind of what the Raiders do, is it's like they will go downfield. I say that the whole idea is that they embrace the third downs, and they do. But they also are not afraid to go downfield. They just pick their spots. And that's an example of just picking your spot. You see a situation that looks like it's going to be good, so you simply just then try to go deep, as opposed to some teams that'll just try to go deep at random and hope they just, fool you in the sense that you had no idea it was coming because it was relatively random. So again, now we're going to be there's going to be a double team, and that's basically where Jacobs should run to, is just pick a spot on either side of that double team. That is where he is going to go, and it's able to work out pretty well. He cuts back a little bit over to the left side of the screen, picks up 6 yards. Sometimes the all-22 footage makes it look like you're not gaining as many yards as you do. 6-yard pickup, that's pretty solid, because again, at this point, you kind of have your options open. You're also now right around the 10-yard line, so you can go for the end zone if you want. They will not. They will go for another running play. This one doesn't work out too well. It gets kind of blown up by Denver, so not really too much to talk about there. Now you have a third down. They got 2 yards, actually, so not a disaster, but nothing great either. It's a third down and 2. Several different options you can have here, and for the Broncos, they don't know what's coming. This could be a running play. This could be a passing play. It could be whatever. They are going to be going with a cover 1 play where they're basically trying to take away the middle of the field, and for the Raiders, that's actually the route that Carr wants to throw to, but this is a difficult route to throw to, there's 2 Denver players in the middle of the field, and it's man coverage. So at a certain point, there will be 3 Denver players around Williams, who Carr is trying to throw to. So this could definitely be a bad thing in a sense, but watch this throw. Basically, watch this entire play. Carr is very patient, makes the throw at the perfect moment, makes a very accurate throw. So that's kind of how this offense works in a lot of ways. Carr doesn't have to do something on every play necessarily, but when he does have to do something, it's very important for him to come through. I think a lot of people would view that as saying, well, what Carr does, it's not that important. He doesn't have to do as much as these other quarterbacks, therefore his job isn't as important. But it can really be debated because while he doesn't get as many opportunities to, push the ball down the field, you'd think that makes it easier on him. At the same time, if he screws up, then he really screws up. They really need him to come through on those select few plays. So, yes, he doesn't have to do as much, but what he has to do is much more important than your typical quarterback. So, there's pros and cons for sure. There's one thing I maybe didn't talk about as much as you could argue I should have on that first drive. Obviously, I can't bring up plays that didn't happen on the drive if I'm going to show the whole drive. But one thing that is still a big part of this system that I didn't really get talked about too much on that drive was slant routes, over the middle routes, crossing routes, underneath routes, that kind of stuff. Getting the ball over the middle. That's something that the Raiders love to do, which, logically makes some sense. If their whole offense is based around, let's not necessarily worry about getting a ton of yards every play, let's just focus on getting some yards every play, well, slant routes, and things of that nature can be a key way to do that. And if we're going to properly evaluate Derek Carr, we do have to talk about what can he do for the Raiders in that system, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters, Maybe Derek Carr can be a great punter too, but the Raiders aren't going to ask him to punt, so I don't care about that. I care about what can he do in this system, if you know what I'm trying to say. So how is he at these short routes, crossing routes, over the middle routes? Well, he's pretty good. I mean, take a look at this play, for example. It's going to be a cover one hole, so this is not necessarily the easiest route to throw to. Yes, a slant route with man coverage, especially when the defensive back is playing off, is typically a very good thing, but with a linebacker over the middle, you have to time this one pretty well. If you don't time this one well, I mean, that's how some interceptions happen, where the linebacker drops back, is able to run over and make the play. It can also result in a deflected pass, but Derek Carr, not only is he going to complete this pass, but watch exactly how perfect it is, which allows his receiver to run after the catch. Gets hit pretty hard by a safety, but you're able to pick up more yards, and that's what matters at the end of the day. Oftentimes when you're going with a route like this, it's not so much about just completing the pass. Obviously, completing the pass is the number one thing, but really what you want is to complete the pass in a way that allows your receiver to make the catch and then pick up as many yards as possible. That's what you want. I think a lot of people you can look at completion percentage, for example, and say, okay, well, that's a pretty good idea of how often did you execute a certain play. And, well, it can give you an idea. Sometimes you get the completion, but you didn't make a perfect throw, which is still not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not as good of a thing as it could be. And I feel like Carr, oftentimes, when he's throwing the ball to a route like this, he does a very good job. Maybe no better example than this one, where if this is going to be cover zero that Green Bay is going to be in, and that's the route that Carr wants to hit. It's an over-the-middle route. This is the route that Derek Carr likes, and, it makes sense. This is the route that can work. This is definitely a solid situation for Oakland, but what's also interesting right here is that this is 3rd down and 4, but you don't need the touchdown here. 3rd down and 4, you would like to gain those 4 yards, get a 1st down and goal, and this will probably gain you those yards. But watch this throw, and watch how Derek Carr not just is able to get the 4 yards, but he puts it in a perfect spot, which allows his receiver to catch the ball and get into the end zone for a touchdown. And again, if he throws that ball 3 inches in any direction, it very likely could not have been a touchdown. I mean, it had to be a perfect ball to allow Jordy Nelson that time to make the catch and run over and get into the end zone. Just a very good play from Derek Carr. That's kind of what he can do in this offense. He really does this part of the game very well. This one's another very good example where, again, it's going to be 3rd down and 4, and that's where he's going to try to hit. It's man coverage, little route over the middle, not going to get too far down the field, but again, you just need 4 yards on this play, so who really cares? But watch how right after this ball is snapped, what he's going to do is he's going to be patient, and then he makes a perfect throw, which allows his receiver to fall forward and pick up as many yards as possible. Again, just picking up those yards, that kind of guaranteed that it was going to be a 1st down. Looked like even if it wasn't a perfect throw, but was still a completion, it would have been a 1st down. But the fact that he's able to sort of lead his receiver and make that perfect throw, so it's almost like a baton handoff where you're not slowing down at all to get it, that can really help, and those precious milliseconds really do matter, and that can be the difference in picking up the 1st down on some plays or not picking up the 1st down on some plays. I mean, that can be the difference in, gaining 3 yards or 10 yards on certain plays. It really can. It can have that big of a swing, and so for Derek Carr, the fact that he can do this very well in a system that requires him to do things like that very well, I think is a big plus, and I think that'll go towards sort of showing that, okay, Derek Carr, he does some things pretty well, and that's one of the examples, and I think that's a big example, definitely a big thing in his win column. This is going to be a pass to his tight end, but you'll often see this kind of thing happen with halfbacks as well. What's going to happen is that basically you see there is a Raider who is at the bottom of the screen, but he's running towards the middle of the field, so this now means that for Darren Waller, he will be the only guy who's going to be going down towards the bottom of the screen. So if he can simply just outrun the Indianapolis player who's defending him, this can be a very good situation for the Raiders. So pretty simple, right? Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, it is simple in that regard, but the downside for an offense when you run a play like this is that it's not just a foot race. You also have to be able to turn back, make the catch, and then continue running. So oftentimes these passes, you don't get much credit for throwing an accurate screen pass, but oftentimes this actually is very important for a quarterback to be able to execute. So Derek Carr definitely does have a role on this play, but watch how he is able to make just a perfectly accurate throw. If he throws that ball, 6 inches in any direction, then Waller has to adjust to make the catch, and perhaps he doesn't turn the corner like he was able to do, and he doesn't pick up as many yards as he does. Perhaps he gets tackled, immediately, and they don't pick up much of anything. So that can definitely be a real thing, but for Carr, he did a very good job on that play. And again, screen passes, very similar to over-the-middle passes. You make that accurate throw, and it really does factor in. Here's one more. What's going to happen on this play, it's also against Indianapolis, and it's going to be a bubble screen. This is kind of the Philadelphia special. Well, okay, not the actual Philly special, but this is a play that Philadelphia runs quite often. This is very much a Doug Peterson special. We'll go with that wordage instead. That works a lot better. And basically the way it works is that you have those two receivers on the bottom of the screen, and one's going to run to the middle of the field, the other runs to the outside. This is actually something you'll see teams do a lot in RPOs, where in an RPO, this is something you'll see work a lot in RPOs. There is a play action. I don't believe this is an RPO. I believe this is just play action. I think Carr was going to throw it the whole time. But watch how Carr, again, is able to very quickly get the ball, quickly gets it to Renfrow, who is then able to run over and pick up as many yards as possible. It's all about speed on those types of plays. It's all about getting there quickly, and that's really what Carr can do, and it's what he can do very, very well. Carr is good on those types of plays, but I often feel like those kind of plays often go unnoticed in terms of a quarterback being good. It kind of reminds me of a fable, where the fable is about the plane tree story, where basically it's just there's these two kids, they're walking around, they're tired, it's very hot out, so they're looking for some shade, and they see a tree, and so they start laying by the tree, and they sort of notice that this tree is very plain. It's just there's just leaves. That's all that's on the tree. And so they kind of start talking, and they're like, hey, this tree, it's pretty boring, right? I mean, there's nothing on it. There's no fruit or anything. All it has is leaves. All it does is get leaves everywhere. This is kind of worthless, right? And as they're complaining about the tree falls down and lands on the boys. It's kind of like, basically, if you don't take those little things for granted, you won't realize how important they truly are. Let's be honest. When it comes to the quarterback position, yes, obviously arm talent matters. All of those things do matter. Being able to be accurate, being able to throw the ball deep, all that does matter. But nowhere near as much as having a high football IQ matters. I mean, Tom Brady didn't win 6 Super Bowls by just being talented. He won 6 Super Bowls by being smart and talented. And so how good is Derek Carr's football IQ? Well, there's a lot of things he does very well. There is something that he does that I would say is not too great, but first I'm going to start with the good, then we will get into the not so good. For one thing, without a doubt, you can't even argue that Derek Carr is one of those guys who he views football as a chess game. He's always playing the mental game. He's not somebody that's just along for the ride. He is somebody that is actively playing and actively changing things, especially pre-snap. This is a good example where, as you see right before the ball is snapped, he is now changing something. He's going to be changing something at the line, which is interesting because what happened is right after the huddle was broken up, he realized that it was actually when he had a player move down and someone else followed him. He now knows it's man coverage. He had a feeling it was going to be that before, but now he sees it's man coverage. So he's going to change. Really, that route is what you want to take a look at. That's going to be the key route he's going to change. They're going up against man coverage. It's actually going to be a cover 1 blitz is going to be the official call. And the reason why this is so important is because with one safety deep and man coverage, routes like this can be very effective. Because, I mean, watch. Just see how right after the ball is snapped, his assigned man is able to get wide open. And part of this was because there was a little bit of just the tight end happened to be further to the outside than the linebacker who was covering him. So that already worked, and I have a feeling that was also part of why Derek Carr decided to change things at the line. But another reason it was able to work is simply because he has a tight end that he trusts who can outrun a linebacker. And when you have that, take advantage of those situations. When you see something at the line, change it, give yourself a positive situation. That's what they were able to do there. Again, is that something that's crazy and you'll never see again? No. I mean, you'll see that happen. A lot of quarterbacks do that. But it's really the consistency and how he does that so frequently, and he's so easily able to get those slight advantages pre-snap that really make him one of the smarter quarterbacks in the league, in my opinion. At least in terms of pre-snap. Again, I will get into something post-snap that I don't love, but pre-snap, he tends to be pretty good. This play will be another example of just some smart football IQ right here, where this is going to be a cover 2 man play, but as you notice, there is a lot going on right here. This is not your typical play. I mean, there is going to be multiple Kansas City Chiefs who are blitzing, who are currently linebackers. They're also going to have a defensive end. He'll be the one who drops back and actually ends up covering a tight end. And so, because of that, this now means that since there's going to be a tight end who's going to be going up against a defensive end, this is a good situation. Actually, excuse me, I misspoke. That's actually Williams. That's a receiver. So even better situation. Obviously, there's safety help deep, so it's not quite just one-on-one. But Carr instantly realizes this, is able to get the ball over to Williams. Nothing crazy, but they pick up the first down, and that's often all you need. A first down is never a bad thing. That's what he was able to do on that play. And again, it's just that quick decision making. Oftentimes for a quarterback, that's what you need, is you need to be a quick decision maker. This play is another, I think, interesting example of his football IQ. Not really that it's like necessarily a very difficult play, but I find it interesting how I'll show you. It's going to be man coverage, and those are the routes that his receivers will be running. So it's essentially a pick play, 2 run towards the middle. Darren Waller then runs towards the outside. This play is going to work out perfectly. There's actually a penalty, so it doesn't count, but the play itself works out fine. Waller gets wide open, but notice how Carr totally doesn't panic, puts a ton of air under it, which allowed Waller to, if he had to, adjust to the ball and make sure he gets the catch. I think that it's very difficult to see something like that in real time. Oftentimes you just want to get the ball there, and however you get it, you get it. But I like how he put as much air under it as possible, basically giving himself insurance. If he accidentally throws the ball a bit too far or a bit not far enough, now Waller can adjust to it. Whereas if he just throws it on a line, he pretty much has to hit Waller exactly where he's at. This just gives Waller more time to adjust to the ball, which I find very smart and very interesting. Not a lot of guys do stuff like that, but I do believe that this was an intentional thing from Carr. He saw the play, and he said, I'm just going to take a little bit of air off so that way I can do that. That's what you're supposed to do, and a good job by Carr for figuring that out. I also like this play where it's going to be a cover 4 zone, and those are the routes that the Raiders receivers will be running. So, okay, a lot to unpack here. First, let's take a look at the deep route, which has a move on the bottom of the screen. It's going to get right past the 40-yard marker before it goes off the screen. That's an interesting route on this type of play. One of the reasons why this type of route can work out is usually it's usually good against like maybe a cover 2, because you can get a safety to crash in, then you run further deep and get open that way. But against cover 4, it's probably not going to work out as well. A defensive back is probably going to stay further deep while as one other crashes in, so not really great against cover 4, ideally good against cover 2. So ideally this kind of thing works against cover 2, but against cover 4, it's probably not going to work out too well. However, of course, Derek Carr, he doesn't know what type of coverage this is just yet, because how would he? I mean, it's before the ball is snapped. It could be a cover 2, it could be a cover 4. It's probably going to be one of those two options. And so if it is a cover 4, then what he should do is probably just take a dump off. And look at how, right after the ball is snapped, he looks downfield, quickly realizes that's not going to be open, so just takes a check down and is able to gain some yards. Again, a lot of people actually criticize Derek Carr for taking too many checkdowns, and, an argument can be made that he takes too many checkdowns, but at the same time, a check down is very key. A check down is great. I mean, you can gain 7 yards. You can gain a first down sometimes on check downs, whereas obviously throwing the ball away or getting sacked, that's not good. So a check down is not a bad thing by any means. Obviously, if there's something open down the field, then you want to take what's open down the field. But if it's not open, then just take a check down, because that's better than the alternative. One other play that I find interesting, an interesting example of, I'm not sure if I even call this high football IQ, but just a good quarterback type play, maybe sort of an X factor type thing that you don't see a lot of other quarterbacks making. What's going to happen is that this is a cover 1 play, that's the route he wants to hit, and quite frankly, this is a play that can absolutely work for the Raiders. But one interesting thing is that this is actually going to be a very low snap. However, look at how Carr handles it. He feels the low snap, is very quickly able to then get the ball off and make an accurate throw. I think that factors into high football IQ, just in the sense that he didn't panic. He didn't freak out and do something else. I think you see a lot of guys, once they field the low snap, sort of panic, maybe run around, try to throw the ball away, or maybe even make a decision that they shouldn't make. They try to go too quickly. But Carr was very calm in how he was able to make that throw, which is just one of the many reasons why I do think that Carr is a smart player. I think you can make an argument either way as to whether or not this is a high IQ play or a low IQ play, but I think this will basically just kind of go to show the mindset of Derek Carr as a whole, Derek Carr as a football player, and the kind of decisions he makes. Where this play, really, what they want to have happen here is this is a cover 2 zone, and to have a receiver running in between the linebackers but before the safeties, it can get open. It's a difficult throw to make. This isn't play action. Usually this works better on play action, which that's another thing that Jon Gruden does love to do is run play action, which is why having a good running back in Josh Jacobs is so valuable. And there's going to be pressure, so he has to make his decision quickly, and he decides to just try a check down. It doesn't even work out. It falls incomplete. And I think that kind of just goes to show the mentality of Derek Carr, where he's not somebody who is going to be taking a ton of chances. Jameis Winston, he makes that throw. Derek Carr, he does not. That's just kind of his mindset. That's not to say that he will never take a chance, but typically when he does take a chance, he has to feel like there's a pretty good chance that it's going to work out and a pretty low chance that it isn't going to work out. Although sometimes, I do have to be honest, sometimes he doesn't keep his head upfield, I feel like, where there will clearly be an instance where he should throw the ball deep, but he just doesn't. This is an example where it's going to be man coverage. It's a cover 1 play, so single safety deep. And after the ball is snapped, what's going to happen is that since there's no contained man, Carr is able to run outside the pocket. And really, those are the 2 options he sees. There's a shallower route where you could gain some yards, so not a terrible thing. But also, there's an Oakland player who is deep, who is wide open, and this will easily result in a touchdown if Derek Carr sees this and makes the throw. But he just didn't keep his head upfield. He instead throws a little bit lower, and it just results in some yards, not a ton of yards. And if I'm being honest, this is something I have seen Carr do more than once. He just doesn't see what's going on deep, and it can be a problem. So yeah, just to recap, is Derek Carr the highest football IQ player in the NFL? No, he isn't, but can he definitely get it done in terms of the football IQ department? Absolutely. And not just that, but he definitely is a lot higher than some of these low football IQ individuals. And speaking of low IQ individuals, let's transition on to my next point. And what you'll hear a lot of low IQ individuals say is talking about Derek Carr and how he doesn't trust his deep ball, which you just cannot find anywhere if you watch tape. This is the kind of guy, he has a fantastic deep ball. Sometimes there's just things that get said, and they get said so much that people start to believe them, despite the fact that they aren't true. Like the saying, lightning doesn't strike twice in the same place. It absolutely can. It's absolutely possible for lightning to strike twice in the same place. Same thing with Derek Carr. He absolutely has a great deep ball. Just because you've heard people say the contrary doesn't make it true. I think the deep ball is definitely something that Derek Carr does not get enough credit for. He can throw an incredible deep ball. He's one of the better deep ball throwers in the NFL, quite frankly. He doesn't get a chance to do it very much. As we talked about with this offense, having deep routes just isn't a typical part of it. Unlike a team like Tampa Bay, who sort of thrives off of just going deep constantly, this is not the kind of thing where, as I mentioned before, they pick their spots. They're not going to go deep too often, but that being said, when Derek Carr does have to throw the ball deep down the field, he can be very effective at it. So just because he doesn't have to do it very often doesn't mean that he's choosing not to do it very often. You hear a lot of, well, he doesn't try to throw deep ball very often, or sometimes some people even say he can't, which is just definitely not true. This is a good example where it's going to be a cover 2 zone, and that's the route he wants to hit. So again, not necessarily a super deep ball in this one, but I would consider it deep. It's definitely past mid-range at this point. And basically the way this is going to work is that hopefully the route is just going to cut before the safety, but it's still going to make sure that it gets sort of past everyone who's in the middle of the field. That's the way they're hoping this route can work out. And watch how the tight end does run in that direction. And Derek Carr is going to kind of just put this one in a perfect spot where he allows his receiver to make the catch. I believe that's a receiver, not a tight end. But either way, just a great play by him, and really a good throw by Derek Carr on that one, because what he was able to do was, I mean, I guess if I were to critique it, he could have thrown it a little bit earlier, but at the same time, he just made a really accurate throw. Again, a little bit earlier, maybe it would have been open, but he had to make sure it was open before making that decision. However, once he realized it was open, he threw a ball, and really, again, if that's a foot in any direction, it's an incomplete pass. I mean, it has to be a perfect throw deep down the field, and yet Derek Carr was able to do that. He was able to make that perfect throw, and that's a lot of what he can bring to the table, is making throws like that, where it really does open the playbook up. And I know that a lot of people would say, well, with the Jon Gruden offense, it doesn't really matter too much if you can make a throw like that, right? I mean, it's all slants and crossing routes. Who cares if you can throw a deep pass? But actually making a throw like that can do so much throughout the course of a game. The fact that he can make those throws with such consistency does a lot, actually, because now as a defense, you can't just say, okay, well, that's what they're doing. They're going to be running a bunch of slant routes. Let's just make sure that we are always covering those. You do have to respect the deep ball, because if you don't, that's when they'll hurt you, and they can absolutely hurt you, especially with Derek Carr. Again, they don't tend to go, 50 yards down the field, but they'll go 20, 30 yards down the field pretty consistently. This is a good example of it, where it's going to be a cover 3 zone, and that's the route he wants to hit. So again, this is going to be a pretty deep route, especially Carr is going to, again, drop. He takes a lot of steps back on this one, so it's going to actually be a much further throw than it even already is. So it's already kind of just like a 20-yard throw down the field, but it's going to turn into even more than that. It's going to be like 25 to 30 yards. But watch how, again, he steps back, he waits for his receiver to get open, and once he does, he's able to really quickly get it there, which allows the receiver to make the catch with as much time as possible to turn around and try to gain even more yards potentially. So, again, it's things like that. On that play, it was a cover 3 zone. He had to get it past the linebackers, but before, the defensive backs who were deep, but at the same time, with the play action, linebackers moved in, so that was kind of one of those, yes, the receiver was pretty open, but at the same time, he did a great job of getting the ball there in a hurry, which allowed his receiver to be able to pick up as many yards after the catch, potentially. So, having a big arm doesn't just work on traditional deep balls. It can also work on plays like that, where, he can, because he has a big arm, he can get it down the field in a hurry. Although, let's be honest, the real way that Derek Carr is able to really thrive with a deep ball, it's kind of like the flick of the wrist, put some air under it, get the ball down the field. This is a good example. It's going to be a cover 4 zone. He has a tight end running that route right there. This is a pretty good route against this type of coverage, simply because, there's another receiver, first of all, who's going to be running deep sort of closer towards the sideline on the top of the screen. And so for Waller, he's the tight end who his routes on the screen. He's going to sort of fake as though he's also going towards the sideline, which will get the Green Bay defender who's in charge of covering the zone that Waller is eventually going to go into to also move up closer towards the sideline. And then when he cuts down closer towards the middle of the field, he can potentially get open. It's basically just a one-on-one matchup. But look at how well he's going to do right when he runs this route. He gets wide open, but also look at Carr's throw. And look how Carr pretty much puts it right on the money, so Waller is able to make the grab and continue running and nearly get a touchdown. I mean, again, nearly perfect. I guess you could argue it could have been maybe a little bit further over. But as a whole, I mean, definitely a very accurate throw. And also, again, it's maybe not necessarily the type of thing where you would honestly expect a quarterback to be able to make those throws, but at the same time, the fact that he was able to make that type of throw in a perfect way where it allowed his tight end to make the catch and continue running, that's really where the benefit came in. And that's kind of how he's able to be effective as a deep ball thrower. And I mean, really, for this Jon Gruden offense, a deep ball can be just so crucial. A well-timed 50-yard bomb can really be important in this offense, and it can really factor in very well. Whereas in some other offenses, it might not actually be as important because they don't really pick their spots like the Raiders do. When the Raiders pick a spot to throw a deep ball, they really want that to be converted. And so having somebody who can definitely throw an accurate ball down the field, I mean, that just really helps. I feel like one of the things that I've heard time and time again is that Derek Carr hasn't been the same after his injury. In fact, it'll even go one step further. People will say that Derek Carr is now afraid. He's now soft even, where he does not want to get himself hurt again after, he had an MVP type season get ended due to an injury, people think that he maybe it's just not he's more afraid of contact, and he doesn't have great pocket presence as a whole. I personally disagree. I don't really see that anywhere on tape. It's a narrative that makes sense, but it's not a narrative that I've actually seen anywhere, and it's important to differentiate those two. You can't just go off of what you hear other people say. At least I don't. I only talk about what I can see, and I can only see what I see on tape, and on tape I haven't seen that. I don't know, maybe he is soft, but he hasn't shown it on tape, so personally I'm just going to talk about his pocket presence, his footwork, and what he can show on tape. His pocket presence is actually pretty decent. It's actually, I think, underrated, where this is a good example. It's going to be a cover one play. It's cover one blitz, and so, all one-on-one matchups across the board. He has a slant route that he wants to hit, which makes some sense. This is a good route against the cover one blitz. The middle of the field is going to be open since there's a safety deep, 5 people are rushing, and then that leaves 5 one-on-one matchups. So definitely a good route against this type of coverage. But of course, the downside is it's a blitz. And actually, that Chicago defender, the one that's circled in white, he's going to do a pretty good job of creating some contact, or not creating contact, but of winning his one-on-one matchup. However, watch how Carr is able to calmly step up in the pocket and deliver a pretty good throw. It wasn't complete, but it was a good throw. It was a catchable ball. It just wasn't complete. And I do think that that's a lot of what Carr can do. He can move around in the pocket with pretty good efficiency, actually. He's actually, I think, above average at that kind of thing. So I don't really know where this narrative comes from. It should be mentioned, all of these plays that I'm showing are from last season, from 2019. So it's not like I'm showing plays from 2017, 2016, back when he had his MVP caliber season. He's definitely the kind of guy who I do feel like he's very underrated. His presence is underrated, and also his footwork is underrated. Like, this is a great example where this is very much a Jon Gruden style play action, get the linebackers to move in, then you hit them over the middle, because the linebackers are out of position. You can run a crossing route. This isn't Jon Gruden. This is literally every head coach, every team does this, but especially in the Jon Gruden system, they love to do this. You see Kyle Shanahan also do it a lot. There's a few guys that like to do it more than others, and one of those guys is Jon Gruden. But anyways, I want you to take a look at Carr's footwork here, because he's going to have to basically do a full 360. But watch how he does this. He fakes the handoff very well, but quickly turns around and is able to make a pretty accurate throw to, but it was a pretty accurate throw. And so it wasn't complete, but I do think that that's kind of, if you just look at the footwork part, that was really good. And the throw itself was definitely a catchable throw. Again, was not complete. It wasn't a perfect throw, admittedly, but it was a good enough throw, and I do think that just talking about his footwork there, his footwork was very good on that play. This play's actually, I think, a very interesting example of maybe some bad footwork. It also kind of goes to show how he can throw off balance. I'll just show you the play, and then we'll talk about it. What's going to happen is that it's going to be play action, and then there's a receiver running a quick curl route over there. So that's what you're trying to accomplish here for the Raiders. But also, there's going to be a Kansas City player who's going to create some pressure immediately. Very quickly, he's going to create some pressure. But watch how Carr is able to fake the handoff and then quickly get the ball to a player so he can gain some yards. Pretty good stuff there. But also worth mentioning, just simply the fact that he was so far off balance. Notice how his feet were not planted whatsoever. And you see a ton of interceptions happen this way. I mean, you've seen even Mahomes get into trouble with it. Drew Lock does this a lot. Sometimes it's something that, especially young guys, they'll do a little bit more than they should. You really want to work on that footwork. Granted, he gets away with it sometimes, so it's hard to really blame him too much. I am going to show an example of him not getting away with it a little bit later on. I want to continue showing the good examples, and then I'll get into the bad example. But yeah, I mean, that's something that he will do, and we'll put a pin in it because I will get back to it in just a second. Another thing he can do is step up in the pocket. I've heard that he doesn't do this, which is insane. Carr will often step up in the pocket. He's very good at that. He is not afraid, and this is a good example where Minnesota, both of their edge rushers are going to win the one-on-one matchups on this play, which means that, when an edge rusher is doing good, you want to step up in the pocket. That's just what makes sense, unless, of course, the edge rusher, goes to the inside, then you obviously run to the outside, but rarely that'll happen. Usually they win their one-on-one matchups by going to the edge, which means that as a quarterback, you step up. And watch how Carr is going to do that. There's immediate pressure, but he steps up and is able to have plenty of time to try and make a throw. Nothing was open, but he was able to give himself some time by being able to step up in the pocket. And that's something that he can do with pretty good consistency. This play is another interesting one where what's going to happen is that it's going to be a cover one hole play. There is going to be an Oakland player who's going to be open right around the numbers on the top of the screen. But the problem is going to be that there's going to be a Green Bay player, the one who is circled in white, who's going to do a great job of getting the edge right here, and he is going to create some pressure for Derek Carr. So Carr is going to have to be wary of that. But again, watch how right when this ball is snapped, Carr is able to step up in the pocket, and he's able to make an off-balance throw to get a completion. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about right here, is the fact that I do believe that Carr can make those types of plays. He can run around in the pocket. I haven't seen any difference in his play from before the injury and after the injury in terms of his fear of stepping up in the pocket, his fear of taking big hits. I really just haven't seen it. I haven't. Does it exist to some degree? It's possible, but, I literally watched every snap he's ever played in the NFL preparing for this video. I noticed no difference. So, again, I can only go off of what I see on tape. I feel like a lot of people go off of narratives. That is not what I do. And again, not to throw shade on anybody. I mean, sometimes narratives are right, so you can go off of them. But I always go off of tape, and I just don't see that in terms of tape. I just don't. I have heard some criticism as well about he throws the ball away too much. But again, I feel like almost always, and not always, but almost always, when he throws the ball away, it's usually the right situation. Like on this play, that Detroit Lion is going to create some pressure. He's going to be blitzing right after the ball is snapped, and no Raider is going to pick him up before it. So watch how he gets right through. So Carr is going to have to run for his life. No receiver is open, and so he, does a pump. Still no one's open, throws the ball away. That's the right time to throw the ball away. Listen, throwing the ball away is not a terrible thing. How often have we seen Tom Brady throw the ball away? We see Tom Brady throw the ball away on third down a ton because sometimes that's what you're supposed to do. Granted, there's a difference between throwing the ball away on third down and throwing the ball away on fourth down. So I guess you could, the fourth down throwaway was definitely not a great one. But, again, as a whole, no one was open. He probably should have still given someone a jump ball. That was stupid. But, again, he's not a perfect player. Like, that, it's fair to give him the criticism on that one, trying to do something. Kind of just in the heat of the moment doing something stupid. That does happen. It's a fair criticism of him, but as a whole, I think that more often than not, when he does throw the ball away, it's the correct decision. And I think that one of the reasons why you've seen his throwaways go up a lot over these past couple of years is because he hasn't had anybody to throw the ball to, really. I'm going to get into it, the lack of receiver talent a little bit later on, so stay tuned to that. But I do think that's been a key part of the throwaways for the most part. Again, like I said, he's made some mistakes throwing the ball away when he shouldn't have, but as a whole, I think he does a pretty good job. And I'm getting a little bit off of the thesis of this section of the video of the, footwork, pocket presence, but it kind of is tied in. One more thing that I want to talk about, though, is, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes he will get a little bit lazy with his footwork, won't put the effort necessary into that, and that can really come back to bite him. This play is a good example where that's the route he wants to hit, and again, he is going to kind of just throw it a little bit off his back foot, not put the effort into it necessary, and he's going to end up sailing this ball high, which results in an interception. And that's just the kind of thing where if he gets his feet planted, there's a much higher chance that he's making that throw, and it's not an interception. And that's just a huge swing, and you can't let that happen. So while I do think that his pocket presence is underrated, I think that his footwork, it can be good at times, but he lacks a little bit of consistency. So again, like I said, he's not a perfect player. He has some flaws in his game. That's something that I see. He needs to do a better job of getting his shoulder square, getting his feet set on every play. All you have to do is mess it up once a game, and that can be the difference in that game. So it's very important. Making a mistake like that, honestly, doing that once is one time too many. Carr should not be making mistakes like that. He's a good enough player that he should not be doing that. but he has, and so that is something that I have to talk about when talking about his footwork. But as a whole, I think that his footwork is pretty good. Tennis player Roger Federer said, "Footwork is my game. If I move well, I play well." And while Derek Carr literally plays a different game, he plays football, footwork is still very important in his position, in the quarterback position. It's probably the most underrated thing about being a quarterback. And, if you can play well in terms of footwork, that really goes a long way. And so I think the fact that Carr does have pretty good footwork, unless he's being a little bit lazy, which he can do from time to time, I think that really bodes well. And I think that's yet another thing in the win column for Derek Carr. So at this point, you're probably wondering, okay, Jackson, so if he does so many things well, why would anybody dislike him? Why would anybody have anything negative to say about him whatsoever? And the truth is, I've been talking a little bit through rose-colored glasses, which also, by the way, why would you buy rose-colored glasses? That whole concept makes no sense to me. But back on point, there are some negatives for Derek Carr. The biggest negative? Well, let's get into it. Take a look at this play. It's going to be a cover 3 zone, and that's the route he wants to hit. So, pretty good against this type of coverage. It will get into a gapping coverage. This is a route that Carr likes, and so this makes a lot of sense to throw it to. However, after the ball is snapped, it's not going to work out. Watch how Carr makes this throw, and it's just a bit too high, and it isn't able to be a completion. I think this is where Carr struggles the most, is little plays like this where he has to get the exact right touch on it. And notice how there's kind of a bit of air under it, not a ton of air under it, and I think that that's really where he struggles. I think he's at his best when he can either put a lot of air under it or just make it a straight up line drive, and when he has to kind of, feel it out and sort of get it somewhere in the middle, it's just not always a great idea. It doesn't always work out for him. And, this is a good example where he just throws it a bit too far right here. This is the type of throw that honestly you expect a quarterback in the NFL to make, especially someone who I consider a good quarterback. This is something that you would like to see him make, and this is a weird sort of blind spot that he has in his game. He has such a good deep ball, and he is very accurate on these short passes, but it really is the medium range passes when he has to put the right touch on it. That's where he struggles the most. That is his biggest flaw, without a doubt. This next play is another one where this is going to be a deeper route. This is going to be a one-on-one matchup where that's where he's trying to hit, but he's going to throw it a little bit earlier. So again, it is going to be very similar where he has to try to get the right touch on it. It's Darren Waller he's throwing it to. So, it's the kind of thing that it can work out, and right after the ball is snapped, you're going to notice that Waller, he gets a little bit open, but Carr is just going to underthrow this one a little bit. Waller isn't able to go up and make the grab. Now, if that's Randy Moss, then that's going to be a completion, but Randy Moss makes a lot of completions. Most guys aren't going to be able to make that throw, and as a quarterback, your job is to make it easier on your tight end, which Carr didn't there. He underthrew it a little bit, and again, that's kind of the same thing, where it's like you got to get the exact right touch on it, and he just was not able to do it on that play, which is why it was incomplete. And I just think that that's, again, it's an area where Carr struggles, no doubt about it. And honestly, it makes some sense. I mean, listen, anybody can go out there and throw a football as hard as they can, and anybody can go out there and sort of just, lob one up as high as they can. But it's very difficult when you kind of have to sort of find a middle ground, and it is where Carr struggles the most. It just is. This play will be another example of exactly that. A bit to unpack here. What's going to happen is that it's going to be a cover 1 play, but it's only going to be a 3-man rush for Green Bay. So they're going to have 2 players drop back into coverage. Then it's going to be a cover 1 play. And for Oakland, this is actually good news because of what you see going on the, Derek Carr's left. Those are the 3 routes, and you also see that one of the routes is circled. The reason why I've circled that route is because that's the route that you want to throw it to here. I mean, since there's a lot going on over the middle, ideally you would like to just avoid the middle of the field if possible. There's also a route a little bit shallower, but pretty much that route deep, it's just going to be a one-on-one matchup. And when you factor on to the fact that it's going to be cutting away, since there is a cut, there definitely is a window where Carr can make this throw. Now, there's also a downside to this play. One of the downsides is that it's the ball is getting snapped on the hash marks on the top half of the screen. So for Carr, he's going to have to take the ball on that side of the field and make a very far throw over. So that can be a little bit difficult. And also, it's just when the route cuts away like that anyways, it can always be tough. But you are going to see Carr not just miss this throw, but he actually wildly misses this throw, which is unfortunate because his receiver was open. He just made a bad throw on that one. So again, these are the kind of things where I kind of like doing this long form video. Obviously, time-wise, I can't do this too often, and honestly, financially-wise, I'd make way more money if I just made an 11-minute video, but I thought it would be fun to do it this way. I'd make more money because I can make more videos then instead of having to spend a week on this one. But I like doing it this way because I can show you multiple examples and really show that I'm not just picking out a play in isolation. This is definitely something that he can struggle with from time to time. It really is. And I think that this is probably, honestly, I think you could say that this is the Raiders' biggest problem on offense. I think I could go that far because when the Jon Gruden, style offense, one of the big ways it works is that we're going to get a lot over the middle, and then we're going to take our chances. And the chances aren't always 50-yard bombs down the field. In fact, they usually aren't. They're more often these mid-range type throws. And we've seen that when he has to just throw a bomb or when he has to throw a line drive, he can do that. But he can struggle with getting the correct touch on some of these throws. I also would say that could be argued that's the most difficult throw to make, so it makes sense that he can struggle with it. But at the same time, when your offense needs you to do something like that, you have to be able to do it, and Carr just isn't always able to do it, which is definitely a flaw in his game. This is one more example. It's going to be a one-on-one matchup. His receiver's running a quick double move, so again, this is the type of play where you really want to be able to convert on this. This could end up in a touchdown, especially because his receiver is going to run a great route. He gets open, but there is a safety deep, so Carr tries to put the exact right amount of air under it, puts too much, and it falls incomplete. Again, it's just the kind of thing where that's the difference between a touchdown and a field goal. That's 4 points right there is that throw, which is obviously a huge swing in a football game. 4 points. I mean, how many games are decided by 4 points? That being said, it should be mentioned that it's not like he can never make one of those throws. He absolutely can from time to time. Like on this one, it's a little bit shorter than some of those other ones. It's a cover one blitz play. He has a receiver running a route that's over the middle, so as we've established earlier, these kind of routes are definitely good against this type of coverage. This is the kind of thing he's going to want to throw to. But again, he's not necessarily going to just completely bomb it in there. It is going to be more of a line drive, as I said. But watch how right after the ball is snapped, he is able to make really just a very accurate throw on this mid-range type play. You could argue that this isn't necessarily like those last ones, and I would as well, but it's in the same ballpark, and because he was able to make that such an accurate throw, it resulted in a touchdown because the safety pinched in to try to make a play, which was regrettable in hindsight, and had he made it a little bit less accurate, then it would not have been a completion. So, the fact that he, again, didn't necessarily bomb it in there, but also made it very accurate, that's the difference between an incompletion and a touchdown. So, every now and then he does find a way to make an accurate throw. I think especially when he doesn't have to throw the ball deep. This one's another example of him not necessarily sort of putting that right touch on it, but just making an accurate throw in sort of a mid-range type situation. It's going to be a route over the middle. It's man coverage. It appears as though it's very short, and it kind of is. But again, Carr is going to be taking a lot of steps back here, so it's actually going to be further than it might look. And also, I just like this play because watch as you see when the ball is snapped. Not much separation whatsoever, but Carr is still able to make a very accurate throw, which allowed them to pick up the first down. So, again, those two plays, not really the same as those last plays I showed you, admittedly, but I do think that I think that that's kind of the line I would say that as long as he doesn't necessarily have to go 50-50, as long as he can just go like 25-75, he can tend to be okay. So yeah, I mean, without a doubt, that's his biggest negative in the game, is if he can't make those mid-range throws sometimes where he has to get the exact right touch on it. I mean, we all know what it's like. It's very similar to basketball, where it's like, okay, you kind of know, what a three-point shot feels like, what a free throw shot feels like. But every time you have to make one of those like mid-range shots where there's not really a landmark that you can just sort of know, okay, it's exactly this much, sometimes it's very difficult to get the right the right pressure under there. Also like when you have to shoot up a floater, it's very difficult. Well, it's kind of similar to that with Derek Carr, and that is where he struggles the most. So unfortunate given given the offense that he's in, but he's also not terrible at it either. So there is a negative to his game. I don't think his negative is that large though, if I'm being honest. So I do think that the lack of receiver help actually mattered a lot more than I think a lot of people have realized. And now I know people are going to bring up guys like Hunter Renfrow, like Tyrell Williams, certain guys that maybe weren't disasters, but also there was definitely a lack of a guy who could just get open consistently. I mean, you think back to when there was Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree. Neither of those guys are necessarily, Julio Jones, but two guys that could get open consistently, and it really did help Derek Carr out a lot. And I'll just get into it. Like this play, that's where Carr wants to look. It's going to be a slant route over the middle. It's a one-on-one matchup. This is the route that Carr likes. This is the route that Carr wants to throw the ball to. But watch what happens right after the ball is snapped, because it is a good route against his coverage. But you're going to see it's actually Darren Waller. So, it's a good player, but he's just not able to make the catch. And a large part of the reason why he wasn't was just because, if you notice, he just wasn't able to get enough separation. He wasn't able to cut as quickly, and he wasn't fast enough. I mean, he cut pretty much exactly when you want to, but sometimes just speed is a thing. And if you can't just outrun somebody, you could get into some trouble for sure that way. And that's what happened there with Waller, was he just wasn't able to cut quick enough to actually be able to make a play. And again, Waller's actually pretty good. He's one of Carr's better options, which is why I showed that. I'm not just going to show some fourth string guy and what he can do, because that's not fair. You should show the top end guys, and even his top end guys couldn't get open consistently. Fine role players for sure, but not getting consistently open. And I think that really does matter. I think that hurts his numbers in a lot of ways and makes things so much more difficult than, back when he could just sort of throw up a jump ball to Michael Crabtree. This play is another example where it's going to be a cover 3 zone. That's the route that Renfrow is running. And so this is definitely a route that could potentially get open. Obviously, yes, he's going to be running into the zone that the safety is deep, is in charge of covering, but as he breaks sort of closer towards the sideline, he could potentially get open there. That's what's going to kind of happen. A linebacker picks him up and creates a very little amount of separation, and the ball falls incomplete. But notice what happens when I show this other angle, and notice how Carr actually made a very good throw. He got it past the linebacker, but Renfrow just wasn't able to really get his head in a position where he could see where the ball was, and that resulted in him not being able to make the catch. It was very close to a touchdown, ends up not being one. And, that's kind of probably where some of the frustration would come in for Derek Carr. It's not necessarily that guys are never getting open or that, he has nobody who can run any routes, but it's more so about that lack of a true number one receiver, which he does potentially have now as they drafted a bunch of receivers. And I think that really hurt him. I think that is definitely something that could help him in the future, is having those receivers. And I think it's worth keeping those things in mind when we talk about Derek Carr of seasons past. This is another example where that's the route that he wants to hit. Just a quick crosser over the middle. This is Renfrow once again. Renfrow did a pretty decent job at getting open, but he showed why he wasn't a high pick. By the way, he wasn't really able to catch that much. He kind of struggled, had a few drops for sure. Watch what happens. He's going to actually get open. There's a hold, and he ends up just dropping a very catchable pass. Didn't matter. There was a holding penalty on the defense. They were able to pick up the first down anyways, so, I guess who cares? But at the same time, I think this play just kind of shows that as a whole, the receiving talent around Carr, not the best. It just wasn't. I'm not saying that it was atrocious, but it was definitely well below average, and I think that having somebody who can get open consistently really does help, and he didn't have that, quite frankly. And let's show some plays where he would have guys who could get open consistently, because, it wasn't too long ago where he had both Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree. We'll show one of Amari Cooper first. Amari Cooper, there was a time when he was the same Amari Cooper he has been for Dallas, which is, he's never been someone who can consistently be a true number one receiver, but he's always someone who can be a number one receiver in 8 out of 16 games, and then like a good number 2 receiver in the other 8. This is a good example of him just running a great route. That's where he is. That's the route that he's going to be running. And take a look at how well he runs this, where he's going to cut towards the middle, and just watch how far he gets open. A large part of that was just because he didn't allow much contact at the line, and because of that, he's just faster, able to cut over the middle and get wide open. But think about all of the plays I've showed you before. You really haven't seen guys getting that open. Guys getting so open that any quarterback could make the throw. There was a couple, but even the ones that did happen, a lot of those were just scheme plays where, it was a pick play that worked out very well or something like that. It was very rare to see a simple route, but just a receiver winning it so perfectly. Another thing that you will not see happen very often with the receivers that Oakland had last season, but you would see a couple of years ago, and you will see with a number 1 receiver, is a play like this, where it's going to be a cover 3 zone. That's going to be Cooper's route. You see the route over the middle, and it's play action. So the idea is that the linebackers will move in, then Cooper runs over the middle. Since the linebackers move in, the gaps have been widened, and he can make a throw. Make the catch. That's the way this route is supposed to work. And after the ball is snapped, you're going to notice that it's not really working out too well. New Orleans is doing a pretty good job of staying back, not really making sure that they, are too far towards the middle. So this is now not a great situation for Cooper. However, Cooper realizes this, and so watch what he's going to do. Watch how he instead then runs much further deep, which allows himself to get open and still make a catch. That's not what he was supposed to do on that play. He was supposed to just run over the middle. That's the way that entire play was designed. But once he realized it didn't work, he figured out a different way to get open. And I think that's something that not a lot of guys had. It's something that Carr just hasn't had for the past couple of seasons, is somebody who can make plays like that. And yes, I threw Crabtree in there. I think, people might not think of Crabtree as like a number 1 receiver guy, but there definitely was a time when he was. And he's, again, one of those guys where he can get open consistently and sometimes dominate matchups that a lot of guys couldn't. This is a really good example, actually, where that's where he is. That's the route he's going up against, or that's the route that he'll be running. Nothing too fancy, but watch how he runs it. He's going to kind of fake as though he's going to the middle of the field, then cut to the sideline, and he gets wide open. And that's just too easy of a throw for Carr. There's probably no better example, if we're being honest, than this play, which I'm sure Raiders fans remember. This was week 1 against the Saints of 2016, of that magical year for them. And they were down 1 point. They just scored a touchdown to be only down 1 point, and they decided to go for 2, go for the win, which, you gotta love it. You gotta love the guts it takes to do something like that. And look at what they're going to do. They're not going to get too crazy with this. What they're going to do is they're just going to run a fade route. Say, hey, Michael Crabtree, we trust you to make this play. And that's all there is to it. Carr gets the ball, throws up a jump ball, and Crabtree was able to make the play. I mean, can you imagine them doing that, running a play like that in that big of a moment with the team that they had last year? Because quite frankly, I personally can't. Maybe with Waller, but probably not, and especially not with a receiver. If you keep overlooking weapons, eventually it will get back to bite you. Much like the story of the fox and the wild boar, where the fox walking around a forest sees a wild boar creating tools, creating weapons. The fox, always looking for a reason to make fun of somebody, goes over and says, dude, what are you doing? We live in a forest. There's no enemies around here. Why are you building weapons? And the wild boar says, well, because by the time the enemies show up, I won't have time to make these. And I feel like that's very similar to what you have to do with wide receivers. You can't just push them off, because eventually you're going to need them. Once it gets late into the game, you are going to need somebody who can, get open on a 3rd down and 7. And hopefully for Derek Carr in the future, that he has now those weapons that can really make him be able to be effective. They say it's not how you start, but how you finish. And that sentence itself makes absolutely no sense. I mean, of course it's how you start to some degree. Ask Peyton Manning in Super Bowl 48 if it's how you start or how you finish. Sometimes how you start can make you not even be able to even be close towards the end of the game. But as a whole, I do think there is something to be said towards somebody who can really come through in the clutch in the fourth quarter. Well, typically in the second quarter, if you're an 8 out of 10 quarterback, you're pretty much going to either be like an 8 out of 10 quarterback, you might go up to a 9 out of 10 quarterback, or a 7 out of 10 quarterback, but you're going to be right around in that range. Whereas if you are an 8 out of 10 quarterback in the fourth quarter, you might go up to a 10 out of 10 quarterback, you might go down to a 3 out of 10 quarterback. And Derek Carr, he's not the kind of guy who's going to buckle under pressure. That's absolutely for sure. I mean, just take his game against the Lions, for example. The Lions game was a very interesting one. This drive is actually going to start off with one of the better throws you'll see Carr make all season long. It's going to be a cover one play, and he has a halfback running that route right there, which is a pretty good route. It's going to be a halfback going up against a linebacker, and so since there's hopefully if a lot of time passes, he could get open. It'll be sort of a foot race. Halfbacks typically going to win that foot race, so this is a matchup that you like. But watch this throw. It ends up actually coming close to another receiver, which means that it ends up having to be a much tighter window. But Carr is still able to make it. It's a little bit tough to tell with that angle, but with this angle, you'll really easily get to see how he was able to make a throw. And just right off the bat, they're able to get a chunk play, which is really what they could have really used. And they're able to get the ball all the way into Detroit Lions territory just like that, which is not easy to do at all. And again, it's the kind of thing where I feel like a lot of people in these clutch moments, they might be a bit too timid. Some people are too aggressive, but this is the right amount of aggressiveness of knowing, okay, this is a good situation to make this throw. And even though it ended up actually being a much tighter window than you would have thought on paper, it was still able to be a good enough throw. They were able to get the completion and get the ball downfield. So definitely a pretty good play there from the Raiders' perspective. And, for Derek Carr, that play definitely worked out pretty well. After that, they did not panic. They did not try to do too much. It's very Jon Gruden thing is once you get a deep ball down the field, then run the ball a couple times. So that's what they did. Their next two plays were both rushing plays, and you know what? It worked out pretty well. They were able to pick up the first down after those two plays. So now the playbook is completely open. 3.5 minutes left at this point. First down and 10. I mean, at this point, you're going to have the time to do whatever you want. So you might run the ball here, and Detroit, they might be even expecting a run or potentially some sort of deep pass, one of the two. So they're doing cover zero, and that's what they're going to do, which means that the slant route you see on the screen is a pretty good route against this type of coverage. It makes a lot of sense to throw it to there because you basically just want to get this ball off, but also an advantage is if you can just get someone to break a tackle, this could be a touchdown. Even if you can't, a slant route is still very good because A, it's over the middle, an easy angle to hit, and B, and then if you are able to complete this, it can allow your halfback on this play to turn the corner and gain even more yards. So this is definitely a pretty good situation here for the Raiders if they can pull it off. The downside, of course, is that Carr has to be able to get the throw off because there is going to be immediate pressure. But watch how he is able to sort of almost like a fadeaway jumper, get that ball off, allow his halfback to make the catch, and get the ball all the way to the 10-yard line. Really, I mean, not an easy throw to make whatsoever, not an easy play to make whatsoever, but he kind of made it look easy a little bit. And one of the real ways he was able to make it look relatively easy was just simply because he knew what to do before the ball was snapped. It's just knowing the situation, being calm, treating it like a regular play, and then once the pressure happens, you're not really that worried because you already knew what you were going to do if there was pressure. He already knew, hey, if this is a blitz, I know where I want to throw this ball to. So that way, when it was a blitz, he was able to just say, okay, got to throw it there, as opposed to just seeing what's happening and then making your decision. He made his decision before the ball had snapped of what he was going to do if it was a blitz, which is what you have to do, and it's what he was able to do. It's what he typically is able to do. The next play didn't really matter too much, but I'll show it anyways. It's going to be a rollout. Tries to hit it back in the flat on the bottom of the screen. It's not really going to work out. I mean, as you see what happens, he rolls out. Carr actually does a pretty good job on this. But the halfback just drops it. Actually could have been intercepted. Wouldn't have been Carr's fault whatsoever. But, definitely could have happened there. Also, I think even if that one's caught, this play was kind of red at the beginning. It's not going for too many yards. So either way, I mean, that's not something that necessarily was going to work out too well. Also, I skipped past a run right before that. There was a run for 1 yard. I figured you guys didn't need to see that one too much. You kind of get the idea. But this now means that's going to be a 3rd down. So again, just to explain the situation again, now there's 2 minutes and 10 seconds left. It's a tie game, 3rd down and 9 at the 9. So your 3rd down and goal. This basically means that you don't have to score a touchdown here. You know, a field goal gives you the lead, but at the same time, it's a tough lead. I mean, it's not that difficult to march down the field, get a field goal, and force overtime. If you are the Raiders, you ideally would like to score a touchdown here. Obviously, you always want to score a touchdown, but this would be key if you can get a touchdown, but you also can't do anything stupid because you do want to make sure you at least take the lead. And what you're going to see before the ball is snapped is this is man coverage. The Lions aren't really hiding it too well. It's going to be pretty clearly a cover 2 type play. And it's going to work out pretty well at first, but watch how Carr, he's going to get to the outside, finally finds somebody open, and then is able to make a very difficult throw for the touchdown. That's not easy to do. It really isn't, especially in that situation. A lot of guys would have, A, just made the throw too early because they want to score a touchdown, or B, would have just thrown it away because they don't want to risk not being able to take the lead. But again, it's that perfect balance of aggressiveness, which I actually find pretty ironic because what did I say was my biggest flaw about Derek Carr? It's those mid-range throws where he has to get the perfect amount of touch on it. Can't go too hard, can't go too soft. Well, when it comes to aggressiveness, when you can't go too aggressive and you can't go too conservative, he finds that balance pretty well, pretty spectacularly well, actually. And it's one of the reasons why he is a very clutch quarterback. He also had a really good comeback against the Chargers. This was definitely more of a methodical drive. This is definitely, we're just going to, takes it step by step. We're just going to come through. These were really the 2 big comebacks of last season. So I wanted to break this one down as well and sort of talk about every play that happened on this comeback. Things are going to start off with this play, and what's going to happen is that 2 receivers on the bottom of the screen run deep. Then they're going to have their halfback actually start off blocking, but then he's going to run a route towards the sideline. It's very basic. It's essentially just not exactly a screen pass, but similar idea. Not really a lot can go wrong on this play. So, it's a good play to just try to get some yards and get this drive going. But something interesting is going to happen right when the ball is snapped. Everything works out fine, but Carr just whiffs on this throw. I mean, they had some yards. This could have maybe even been a 1st down, actually. It worked out pretty well, and Carr just completely missed the throw. So, pretty terrible way to start this kind of drive, right? I mean, you're trying to get in scoring position. You want to get some points here, and then you just completely whiff on a throw like that. That's not good, and a lot of guys would definitely let that sort of affect their confidence a little bit. And that's why I find this drive very interesting from Carr's perspective. You need a touchdown here, but for Carr, he doesn't let that faze him. He's going to be very calm and just goes straight back. Okay, now it's 2nd down and 10. Let's just keep going. Let's not panic. The next play is, again, low-risk play from Jon Gruden. I have to think this is intentional, try to get Carr his confidence back, try to get him to shake off that play a little bit quicker. This is going to be it's cover 3 that they're going up against, and basically it's just going to be a design check down to the halfback. So not really the most fancy play in the world, but Carr, he takes the ball, delivers a very good throw where, again, kind of back to what I talked about earlier, the kind of throw that allows his player to try to pick up as many yards after the catch as possible, which is definitely key on a play like that. If he makes a slightly worse throw, well, then it could easily end up resulting in maybe still a 1st down, but maybe not. Maybe it ends up being like a 3rd down and 1, 3rd down and 2. You can convert on those, but that's just a risk that you would ideally like to avoid, and because of that very accurate throw, they were able to avoid it, and they're able to pick up the 1st down and just keep moving the ball down the field. And I also do feel like that 1st down can be so crucial, especially after a bad 1st down on the last one where, you don't get any yards, to then just pick up the 1st down. It's kind of just a reset, and you can now go from here. So this next play, it's again going to be cover 3 zone. The Chargers run a lot of cover 3 zones, so not too surprising. The 2 Raiders receivers on the top of the screen are going to be running deep, and Carr obviously knows this, and he knows what coverage that the Chargers are in, so he has an idea. He's going to look at the line. he actually has a route that he likes closer towards the bottom of the screen, but if that's not too open, or if he notices that he has a lane to run sort of closer to the top of the screen, he's not afraid to take off and run with the ball. Those are kind of his two options. Look down at the bottom of the screen, and then also look at the top of the screen, and either run to the top of the screen or throw to the bottom of the screen, and right after the ball is snapped, the route is kind of open, but he also just sees he has some space, so he runs, slides, picks up a few yards. Again, nothing crazy, nothing groundbreaking, but it makes second down easier when you gain some yards on first down. It absolutely does. It's now going to be a 2nd down and 6, so now they're going to try to do this play where, okay, a bit going on here, but basically, again, cover 3 zone that they're going up against, and look at the concept that you're going to see right here. The tight end and receiver on the top of the screen are both going to be running routes towards the sideline, and this is actually very good against cover 3 zone if executed properly, although spoiler alert, it is not going to get executed too properly, but the way it's supposed to work is that, one player runs deep, that pushes the defensive back who's on that side of the field further deep as well, another player runs underneath, and he can potentially get open. Also, the other route you see, that's just a check down route. That's just a, hey, if all else fails, throw it over there. And right after the ball is snapped, what you're going to notice is that right now, if you look at the black sort of shape, I should probably know what shape that is, but the shape that I have over there towards the offensive line, there is immediate pressure going for Carr. So maybe he would like to wait a little bit longer, see if he can make a throw deep, but he realizes that it's going to be tough. And for one thing, those two receivers just aren't running far enough apart for this to really work either. They need to have time to split a little bit better, so not great from them. But also, at this point, if you just take the check down, you can guarantee to gain some yards. So Carr is going to step up, flip it to his receiver, and they gain a few yards. Again, nothing crazy, but they picked up the first down on that play, so that's very key. And now you have the ball at midfield. And again, they haven't really had to take a risk yet, getting the ball at midfield in a pressure situation, and they still haven't had to take any risk, which is really kind of why this offense can be effective, is it sort of takes these dangerous plays out of it and makes for a turnover-worthy play to be very, very rare. Again, on the very next play, you're going to see a similar thing, a similar low-risk type play just to try to gain some yards. It's going to just be a quick pass to the halfback. That's the Charger who's going to end up covering him. So, it's a halfback against a linebacker. You kind of trust your halfback in this situation. And watch this route, and again, watch the throw as well, where it's really well-ran route. But also, Carr did a good job of putting it in a position, yet again, where his player could make the catch and then continue running after making the catch and gaining as many yards as possible. A play like that does look simple, and again, it's not the highest degree of difficulty that you'll ever see from a play, but that's kind of the whole point, is let's just slowly move down the field. Let's not put ourselves in a situation where we're going to turn the ball over. Let's put ourselves in solid situations and just hope that Derek Carr isn't going to be making a mistake too often, and maybe the 1 or 2 times we need him to come through, he can. This is going to be basically this play. What's going to happen is that it's just going to be a rushing play, but they don't pick up any yards. So that play, not that big of a deal, but now it's 2nd down and 10. So again, they could really use a first down here. At least gaining some yards is important. You would love the first down, but if you can't gain the first down, at least pick up some yards, make it an achievable 3rd down. That's the way that you would like this to work out. And on this play, it's now going to be cover 2, so a little bit different here. And those are the 2 routes that they want to throw to. This is better against cover 3, which is partially why the Charger decided to change things up a little bit on this play. Because there's 2 players that would typically be in one zone of the cover 3, but with the cover 2, there's now an extra player in the middle of the field, which kind of makes this work a lot better for the Chargers. Although it still can work out for Oakland, they just have to be a little bit better at figuring out how to make sure to make this play work. And watch what Carr is going to do. Watch how Carr, the windows are going to be smaller, but watch how Carr is going to evade some pressure by stepping up in the pocket, makes an off-balance throw, and is able to make this completion, and they get the first down, get in field goal range, and, field goal range doesn't really matter, but, get inside the 30. And that's a huge play in that game. If he's not able to make that play, which a lot of guys aren't going to be able to make that type of play, then they aren't able to get the first down, and now it's 3rd down and 10 potentially, and that could be a very dangerous thing. This is kind of what I talked about with Derek Carr and with this offense, is they don't need him to make a play on every single play, but there are going to be certain instances where they do need him to make a play, and it's going to really come down to, can he come through? And on that play, he absolutely was able to come through. They then decided, hey, let's take a shot here. We have an opportunity. Let's see if we can score a touchdown right now. So we're going to have a deep route towards the sideline. Derek Carr put us in a position to potentially win this game. That's the hope. So that's what he's going to try and do on this play. It is going to be a deep route. And, his receiver, not really too open. He tried to fit it in there. There wasn't much separation. Wasn't able to be a completed pass. Hard to blame him on that one, but not a terrible idea to take a shot. And it's definitely something that absolutely can work. And so from that, now it's a 2nd down and 10. The 3rd time now this drive that has happened. It's obviously not an ideal situation. Not a disaster situation either, but just not quite ideal. And what's going to happen next is going to be this. It's going to be a cover 4 zone, and basically every receiver is running deep, and then the halfback is going to run shallow. This is going to push a lot of the Chargers players further deep. Carr can simply just dump it off. You can gain some yards and try to, maybe pick up the first down, or at least gain some yards and make it a very easy 3rd down situation. And keep in mind, you need a touchdown, so this is 4 down territory. You can't afford to, if it's a 3rd down and 5, you can afford to pick up 4 yards. That's not a bad play. But anyways, watch how this works out. Again, Carr, he actually has to evade some pressure to just allow his halfback to have time to get out. But he does that, is able to flip it up to his halfback, and they pick up some yards. Again, just a very good play from Carr. Just knowing what you're supposed to do and figuring out a way to do it. There's no panic in any of these plays, especially with pressure. I think you would see a lot of guys panic and a lot of guys make the wrong call. That is not what Carr does. And, he hasn't been in the league that long. There's a lot of guys who have been in the league for twice as long as he has who still wouldn't have the wherewithal to, be patient enough to wait, get around the pressure, and make that type of play. But Carr is able to do that, which is one of the reasons he has so many 4th quarter comebacks, how he is able to be so successful in the 4th quarter. What's going to end up capping off this drive was actually a running play. It's going to end up just being a rushing touchdown to give them the lead. So that part, not necessarily too much of Derek Carr doing something great. It's kind of more so just, he handed the ball off on that play. But the drive as a whole, I think, really kind of goes to show what often goes into these game-winning drives. It's often not just, throwing the ball deep down the field, this sort of domination. Oftentimes it's just being patient, accepting the 4-yard gain. That's what he was really able to do throughout a large part of that entire drive, I thought. That started off with a terrible throw. It started off with him completely whiffing on a throw that he shouldn't whiff on. It was not that difficult of a play, and he was able to go from that to getting all the way down the field and the Raiders scoring a touchdown. Again, was there any, oh my God, that's a crazy good throw? No. And I think that's partially probably why Carr doesn't necessarily get the credit that some other quarterbacks do, because he's not asked to make those throws that are high degree of difficulty. But when he had to come through on that drive, he did. And finally, let's talk about one of my favorite weird endings to a game you will ever see. That's the Chiefs going up against the Raiders. This was right after Derek Carr had his, MVP type season, then got cut short due to him getting injured. They were in the playoffs, but didn't really have a shot without Carr. Then 2017 comes around. A lot of expectations for the Raiders. They're starting to falter a little bit, but have some hope if they can beat Kansas City, where just all chaos would break loose. It was the game that would never end, and so let's just get into it. The first play that made it seem like this football game was going to be over was this one, where it's actually going to start off very bizarre. So there's a safety who's deep, and it's man coverage. So there's 3 Kansas City Chiefs in total who will be covering the 2 routes going to the bottom of the screen. But if you notice, they're going very close to each other, which you have to think is just some sort of a mistake, although part of me wonders if there was some intent to this, because this actually happened a few times throughout this game, so I almost wonder if maybe this was sort of their almost Hail Mary type thing that they were trying to do here. But anyways, both Oakland players are going to run deep. Carr makes actually a perfect throw which it was initially ruled a touchdown. It ended up being overturned. They got the ball to the 1 yard line. But really, I mean, that throw in that situation is so difficult to do. There's 3 Kansas City players in the area, and yet he still puts it where only an Oakland player can make the catch, and he is able to make that catch. So, I mean, really, just a remarkable play from Derek Carr, and, under the circumstances, definitely an incredibly clutch play. With only 23 seconds left that far away, I mean, you're almost in Hail Mary territory, especially on a 3rd down and 10, and they had no timeouts left. So, getting the ball over the middle, that's not going to be too helpful. Just a tremendous throw from Carr, but as I said, it's not over. They initially ruled it a touchdown, but then they overturned it. It's now going to be at the 1 yard line. So now Carr has to try something else. And so he is going to try something else. He's going to just say, hey, let's give it to Crabtree. He's a great goal line receiver. Let's throw it to him, see if he can make a play. That's the route that Crabtree is going to be running. It's actually a pretty, high reward, low risk type play. This is the kind of play that you really do expect Crabtree to be able to come through on. Worth noting, there is 8 seconds left, so ideally you kind of have the mindset of, okay, well, maybe this could result in a touchdown. If it doesn't, we probably still will have 1 or 2 more seconds left to run one last play. So it's definitely a good decision. For Carr, though, just catch the ball and throw it. Don't risk anything. That's what he does. Throws a very good ball. Crabtree makes the catch, but he makes the catch after pushing off, which resulted in a penalty, and now to go 10 yards further down the field, which honestly could have been the end of the game. Keep in mind, they don't put time back on the clock, so now you basically are down to your last play, which is, definitely not a great situation for the Raiders. And here's what they're going to do. What they're going to do is they're going to have those 2 receivers run those 2 routes right there. So basically, since, for Kansas City, they know that all they have to do is avoid a touchdown, they're going to be they have 5 Kansas City players who are just right around the goal line. They're just total goal line defense. If you get the ball anywhere that's not in the end zone, it's game over. Kansas City wins. So just keep the ball out of the end zone. So for Derek Carr and for the Raiders, they're going to have those 2 receivers run those 2 routes, which makes some sense. One runs deep and the other runs a little bit further underneath. Basically, the idea is that you get 2 guys close enough together, then the Kansas City player who is in charge of covering that area of the end zone will only be able to cover one of them, and this can give you a one-on-one matchup. It's not a great situation, but, it's really hard to score a touchdown when you have to at the 10-yard line. It's very difficult. You really want to get inside the 5 because otherwise teams can do something like this. But watch how it's going to work out. There is a window. Carr, again, isn't quite able to get the perfect touch on it, largely because, again, that's an insanely difficult throw. You can't really blame him at all. There was a Kansas City player in the middle of the field as well, so he had to try to get it over him, but still not too far where it gets over the receiver. I'm not even sure if there was a window. If there was, it was literally a mailbox type window, and he wasn't able to make it. But there was a penalty, and honestly, that's partially maybe why he wasn't able to make it, because the penalty did not allow the space to get as big. There would have been a bigger window had there not been that penalty on the defense. And so I do think that probably did factor in, and that could have been a reason why Derek Carr was unable to make that initial throw. But he's not going to complain too much. Yes, the touchdown would have been nice, but now you get another play, so at least you have that going for you. And of course, it's a half the distance to the goal. So now you're actually in a much closer situation where you can potentially have a much better chance of scoring, as opposed to it being almost a Hail Mary type situation. Now you have a much better opportunity to try and score right here. And so, again, obviously the touchdown would have been better, but you'll certainly take this opportunity to try and score. Because then what's going to happen is that, again, that's the route Carr wants to throw to. What you really want to take a look at is there is a Kansas City Chief who's going to be sort of covering that section of the end zone. And, of course, with it being man coverage, this means that, there could end up being a double team in that area. You have to be wary of that. But that's where Carr is going to look to throw this ball to. He does look in that direction, throws a very accurate ball, but because of the interference, it is not able to be complete. So it's incomplete, but there's an interference penalty. So, again, now you get the ball in a good position. You get the ball sort of back where you started from. Once again, you have a situation where you can pick up the touchdown here, and they're kind of going to say, you know what, let's just go back to the well one more time. Let's give Michael Crabtree an opportunity. He's going to be our guy. He's going to be running that route right there. It's also going to be a rollout in that direction. So, again, this kind of goes to show just the shift from what the Raiders were doing a couple years ago to what they're doing now. I mean, they're running a play through a receiver, which they just do not do now. Part of it is because I think Jon Gruden just doesn't love to do that. But also, it's a huge part is just because they didn't have a Michael Crabtree last year. You know, they didn't have one 2 years ago. So I do think that this is kind of what can really maybe help Carr in the future, but also watch how well this works out. He does roll out, and he's going to make just, again, a perfect throw. And the reality is on all 5 of those plays, he had to do his part because, you know, even the ones that didn't necessarily go as planned, like let's just take the first one, the one that he got to Michael Crabtree, but it was a penalty. If he misses that throw, well, then they just decline the penalty, and, you know, the game might not be over, or maybe you do accept it because it depends on if there's still time left on the clock. Who knows if there would have been with the missed throw, but if there wasn't, they could have just declined the penalty and won the football game. With the 2 that ended up being penalties on the Chiefs, he still had to put the ball in a good enough location to where a penalty could happen, and on the last one, obviously, he just had to make a great throw to get the touchdown. So, as a whole, you know, Carr, I think it's officially fair to say that he is clutch. He can come through when he has to. In the big moments, he absolutely can, which is definitely very key, especially for an offense like this, where they're going to run a lot of, you know, going to run the ball a lot. They're going to run a lot of short passes, which is going to shorten up the game. It means that there could be a lot more close games, and they're going to need Carr to come through when it matters most more often, and he is somebody who can do that.
Yeah.
You know, I personally hate watching my old YouTube videos or even like the podcast. I mean, I'm probably not going to enjoy watching this one, but at the same time, it is kind of important to rewatch what you've done just so you know what you did wrong, even though it sucks seeing you do something wrong or saying something not quite perfect. It definitely is always frustrating, but at the same time, it can really help you learn a lot. I have a feeling that the Raiders players really are not going to enjoy watching what happened on their losing streak, but I do think it would be important for them to look at and see what happened. I mean, let's just take the very first loss where, remember when I talked about how those third downs can be so important? Well, that was really the case in this game. Like, take a look at this one. It's going to be man coverage, and that's the route Carr wants to hit. So, you know, nothing too fancy here. This is very much a Jon Gruden style play. Can totally work. Worth mentioning, this is a 3rd down and 9. So, you know, ideally, you really are going to have to execute this pretty well to convert it. And, you know, that's why you try to avoid 3rd down and 9s, because they're relatively difficult to execute. But watch how Carr is going to actually step back, make a pretty accurate throw, but, you know, his receiver just flat out dropped the ball. And, you know, part of that's probably the weather. This was just a messy game. It was very rainy, so I'm sure that factored in. But at the same time, you can't drop that ball. And it looked a little bit like he cut a little bit too early. He probably should have cut another yard or 2 further back. So just a bad play by Renfro on that one. And that's the kind of thing that, listen, it technically in the stats column will go against Derek Carr. It's hard to blame Derek Carr for that one. It's a mistake that shouldn't happen, and it did happen. And that can really hurt you in a football game. Missing a 3rd down like that, again, especially for the Raiders, who really rely on being able to convert on those types of plays. That would not be the only bad mistake on a 3rd down. This one was another one where the play concept itself is pretty simple. It's cover 3 zone, receiver running over the middle. This is something that absolutely can work, and it can work very well, especially because what's going to happen is that this is actually, you know, it's a cover 3 zone. I actually think I put the wrong graphic on here. This is actually cover 3 zone with an extra New York Jets player dropping back into coverage. So the windows are going to be a bit tighter, but at the same time, this is going to be okay for the Raiders because they just have extra time to make this throw since there's only going to be a 3-man rush. So that definitely is, you know, pros and cons, but watch how right after the ball is snapped, Carr is patient, he waits for his receiver to get open, makes a great throw, and again, just a flat-out drop. I want to say it's something that can't happen. That's not really true. It obviously can happen. I think back to the Kansas City Chiefs game against the Texans, where they had a couple receivers drop passes early on third downs that resulted in a couple of quick punts. And obviously they came back and won that football game. But the reality is, it's just a huge swing to have something like that happen, especially with a football team that might only see 8 or 9 drives in a game. To lose a couple just off of drops like that, you just don't want to see that happen. And it's very frustrating for an entire offense, I would imagine. You design a play well, everybody does their job, and you drop a pass. Yes, it does happen, but you don't want to see it happening multiple times in a game. That's absolutely for sure. It can really put you behind the 8 ball. And when you are, looking a little bit back like that, now you might have to start taking some chances. And not only that, but now you have to just play a lot better throughout the rest of the game to make up for it. And they didn't totally do that. I mean, here is another example. This is actually kind of a great play by the Jets, but what's going to happen is that it's zone coverage, and the routes you see on the screen is what the Jets will be going up against. This is good against zone coverage. You have a receiver run deep, another receiver run sort of underneath. This pushes the player who's in zone further deep. You can then throw the ball underneath, pick up some yards that way. Pretty simple play, but what's going to be very interesting about this play is how well New York realized this. Look at how that New York Jets player, he's totally reading this play. He's realizing what's going on. He knows he has a safety behind him, so he's okay with passing off the player running deep to the safety, and he's going to cut underneath. This is what you ideally want to do, but it's a lot easier said than done most of the time. So pretty good job by him to just read this play and figure out what's going on. And he's going to run over. He's going to deliver a big hit, which doesn't allow the Raiders to pick up a first down. And so, that's kind of the thing where you get 2 dropped passes and then a defensive player just makes a great read on another third down. And that can just put you so far behind. And that can just be really a huge blow in a lot of ways. I do think that they didn't have receivers getting open. And it looked like there was just some questionable play calls. It almost looked like some people ran the wrong route or something. Like a play like this. This is just a classic example of just having the wrong concept for the certain coverage, where this is cover 2 zone, and those are the routes that the Raiders will be running. You would expect them to do this kind of thing against a cover 3, if there's a single safety deep, but as you can just see right here, there are clearly 2 safeties who are deep, so this isn't a play that's going to work out too well. As you see, once the ball is snapped, just nobody is open, and a lot of that is because none of these routes were going to be open, but Carr was still looking in that direction. I wonder if maybe he thought this was a disguise and it was going to be a cover 2, or a cover 3, or what, but either way, just not a great idea whatsoever. And also looked like a lot of those receivers kind of half-heartedly ran on that one. Maybe they weren't feeling too good about that play as well. So, things like that, just sort of a weird game as a whole, but also not the best game from anybody on that Raiders offense. It really wasn't Carr's fault at all. I mean, it's not like he was missing throws out there, just things weren't working, and I think that Jon Gruden maybe made some mistakes in that game. I think the receivers definitely really faltered and really were not very good. And it really showed in that game, and I think that's a huge reason why they ended up losing. I am admittedly a pretty big Jon Gruden fan. I think he's pretty smart, really good football mind, I think, but he isn't perfect. He has gotten beat. There's probably no better example of really the Raiders, Jon Gruden, and Derek Carr getting outsmarted than what happened against the Kansas City Chiefs at Kansas City. That was probably their worst example of it. This play will be a good example of that, where what's going to happen is that it's going to be a cover 1 hole play, and that's the route that Derek Carr wants to throw the ball to. So, makes sense. This is definitely a good route to throw to against a type of coverage on paper. So, Carr is going to look in that direction. So, doesn't seem like they're getting outsmarted. Seems like they're going to, they're the one doing the outsmarting, right? I mean, look, after the ball is snapped, that receiver is open, but as you see with the black circle right there, there's another Kansas State player who is keeping his eyes downfield. And what he's going to do is he's going to say, okay, I have a safety deep. I'm simply going to pass off the receiver that I'm covering to the safety, and I'm going to cut over towards them, where they're going to try to throw this ball to. This is kind of the example of, we've watched enough tape. We know they like to do this. Well, let's be a little bit prepared for them to do something like that. So when Carr does throw it in that direction, it now turns into a double team, and they're able to get an interception. That's something that it's almost hard to blame Oakland for as much as it is to just give credit for Kansas City. I mean, in man coverage, you don't expect somebody to get off of their initial coverage and cover somebody else. I mean, that rarely happens, but for Kansas City, it was smart for them to do that. It definitely was, and it was definitely a good play from them. This next play is another good play where it's going to be a tight end screen right here. So, definitely something that's pretty basic, something they like to do very frequently. But really just watch how Kansas City is just all over it. Watch how, a player gets the car very quickly and another player is able to run over and get to the tight end they're trying to throw to very quickly. So there's nothing Carr can do, and he has to just throw the ball towards the ground to make sure it's not a sack or an interception or something like that. So that's just another example of just Kansas City being prepared and Oakland not really having much of an answer. And I think this is also part of the problem with the Raiders offense as a whole, with them not having receivers as well, is, you kind of can't do too much to counteract it. If your entire offense is built on just scheming guys open, well, if you're not going to outsmart the opposing defense, you're not going to get many guys open because you can't just have guys go towards the edge, run deep, and outrun a safety. It's not going to work because they don't have that kind of guy. This was another interesting one where it's going to be cover 2 man, and that's the route that Derek Carr is going to want to throw to. It's a route cutting over the middle, definitely a pretty good route against this type of coverage again. But keep in mind, with the cover 2, that route is going to cut just before the safety who is deep. So Carr, he wants to throw it in that direction. That's the idea, and on paper, this makes sense. But the Kansas City player knows they like to run a lot of plays like this. So look how the safety is going to kind of just pinch in right here. He reads this play, runs in, and actually gets an interception and is able to return it for a touchdown. That's just the Chiefs understanding who they're going up against. And these are kind of mistakes that, honestly, I'm not going to say you don't want to see have happen because they happen. That's just football. These kind of things are going to happen. You're going to get outsmarted from time to time. But they did get outsmarted quite a bit in this game, and I do think that that's definitely a flaw in not just Derek Carr's game, but also, the whole Raiders as a whole. And I think this kind of probably would be the biggest negative and the worst loss in that losing streak, also against the best team. So it does kind of make some sense. However, this is definitely one that I probably don't feel too great about after it was over. So after losing back-to-back, they went on to face Tennessee, who, Tennessee was definitely on a roll. They were definitely very good in the second half of the season, but Oakland had a real chance to win this football game. The game was tied at halftime, but the Raiders didn't end up scoring at all in the second half. And a large part of it was just due to the fact that they just weren't able to really convert on third downs. Again, third downs, so important in this Jon Gruden offense, and it does kind of mean that if you don't convert on a couple of plays, that can be the difference in a win or a loss. Obviously, the flip side is if you do convert on those plays, then you'll probably win. So, it's definitely a high-risk, high-reward type thing, but let's just get into some breakdowns from that game. Like on this play, it's going to be a cover 2 zone blitz, actually. So, it's still zone coverage, but with a fifth man, we'll be rushing the passer. And for the Raiders, that's the route that you see on the screen that they want to hit. It's a pretty good route against this type of coverage. Will get past the linebackers, cuts before the safeties who are deep, gets sort of in that middle area, the eye of the storm type thing. And so this is where Carr wants to throw this ball to. It's a 3rd down and 2, so they really do want to convert here. You don't need a first down. You just need to get you don't need a ton of yards. You just need to get the first down, which will only be a couple of yards. So that's where Carr is going to try to throw this ball to. But notice how right when the ball is snapped, he just doesn't have the time to make this play. Maybe he could have tried to find a check down, but when you don't have much time, it's very difficult to make that type of play. Admittedly, there was a check down available. He probably should have thrown it there instead of trying to make the play work. But at the same time, he deserves some blame for that. Also, the offensive line deserves the most blame for not being able to pick up the blitz and allowing immediate pressure. So, yes, I guess you could give blame all around on that play, but that was the first 3rd down they weren't able to convert on, and that was definitely, a big one. But okay, listen, you make one bad play on 3rd down, that's okay. Just come back on the next one. The next one, what's going to happen is that this is going to be a screen pass. You see, what you see for the Titans, those 2 arrows, is just because one of them's actually going to be, it's kind of a rotation. One's going to actually be rushing the passer. The other will kind of take his place, though. So essentially the same idea as it would be if they were just running this traditionally. And it's going to be a quick screen pass. This is a play that can absolutely work out. It's 3rd down and 4. You just need 4 yards. But watch what's going to happen with the Tennessee Titan defensive back who's closest to the bottom of the screen. Watch how well he's going to get around this block. Again, hard to blame Derek Carr for that one. That was mostly just really, I already talked about the lack of receiving talent. I didn't mention that the lack of receiving blocking talent, but you got to make your blocks, and the fact that they weren't able to do that there, that was a crucial blunder for sure. And at a certain point, these couple of mistakes did eventually allow Oakland to get down by 14. It's now 35-21. But, there's still about 13 minutes left in the game, so you do have time. All you need is one quick score, and you're right back in it. So not the end of the world, not time to panic, but you definitely need to get something going. And so what they're going to do, they're close to midfield. This is cover 2 zone. Those are the routes that Carr is looking at. And what Carr is going to do is he's just going to play it safe and do a check down. Pick up some yards. Nothing really too exciting, but it makes sense. It's a 1st down and 10, so this definitely is something that makes a lot of sense to do. However, watch how right when the ball is snapped, Carr, this play is working out pretty well. He's able to get the throw off to the check down, but then he just fumbles it. A Titan player is able to pick it up and score a touchdown. And that was kind of the dagger. That was pretty much the end of the game. And, sometimes in football, that's all it comes down to is you don't execute on a couple of 3rd downs. A big play like that happens, and now you're down 21 points in the 4th quarter, which is nearly impossible to come back from. Not impossible, but nearly impossible. And that's what happened there in that game. And so that's how they were able to lose to the Tennessee Titans, who also, by the way, were a pretty good team last year and were really hot at that time. So, yes, they lost the game, but they also, they held their own against a really good football team. So I guess you could say, you can't say that was positive, but at least you can kind of say, well, maybe not the biggest negative in the world, perhaps. Losing to the Jacksonville Jaguars late in the 2019 season is inexcusable. It should never have happened. And the fact that it happened in the last game in Oakland really just, pours some salt in the wounds, I think. But that being said, was it Carr's fault? Not really. Honestly, the worst thing about this game, I thought, was the Oakland tackles. The Oakland tackles just did not play well whatsoever. They completely didn't. And that was the difference maybe not the difference in a win or a loss, but it probably was. Carr was under pressure all game long. And part of me does wonder if, Tom Cable is the Raiders' offensive line coach. Definitely not exactly beloved. Makes you wonder if that has something to do with it, but it's really hard to say because we can't really see it on tape. We can only just speculate. So definitely without a doubt, because I do actually like the talent on that offensive line, but a couple of times they did get beat uncharacteristically bad, and this was one of those games. This first play is a great example of really just a blown opportunity, I would say, from the Raiders' perspective, where what's going to happen is that Waller is right over there. He's running a deep route towards the end zone. This is a 3rd down and 7, so, you're already up 4 points. This is a 7-3 game in the 1st quarter. You would like to score a touchdown here, just make it a 2-score game already, not even have to worry about it. That's the hope right here. And, Waller running a deep route. He has height. This is a good thing right now for the Raiders. But watch how Carr takes a snap, makes a pretty accurate pass, but Waller just isn't able to make this catch. It wasn't a terrible throw by any means. It was actually a pretty good throw, pretty accurate, really where you want it, I would say, where it wasn't going to be an interception, but it could have been a touchdown. Waller wasn't able to make that grab. He was arguing that there was some contact, and there was a little bit of contact, but at the end of the day, a number one guy makes that catch. And listen, I like Waller. I think he's a very good receiving tight end, but there's a difference between a very good receiving tight end and a very good wide receiver. And, a receiving tight end, you don't expect him to be able to make that play. It's great when they can, but you don't expect them to be able to make that with some consistency. But for Oakland, they didn't have anybody who could make that with some consistency. And, it took 4 points off the board on this play, because if they were able to make that grab, now it's going to be a 14-3 game instead of a 10-3 game. And that 10-3 lead would, hold for a little bit. Now it's going to still be 10-3 on another 3rd down situation in the red zone. This play is, in the 2nd quarter now. Actually, only a couple minutes left in the 2nd quarter. So, getting close to halftime right here. It's now a 10-3 game. And you have another opportunity. This would be a great opportunity to score another touchdown. go up a clean 14 points. This would be pretty good right here. And that's the concept where they're going to have the receiver on the bottom of the screen run deep. You then have your halfback run towards the flat. This is a pretty good idea, I think. It's low risk, so you're probably going to kick the field goal at least and go up 2 scores, even if it doesn't work out. But, if Carr can get to the halfback quickly, if the halfback can turn the corner quickly, then you could potentially pick up this first down, maybe even a touchdown, but at least pick up the first down and then have an opportunity to try and score. So it makes a lot of sense to run this play call. However, watch what happens. Carr, he steps up in the pocket, makes a perfect throw, then just bounces off Richard's chest right there. One of the more bizarre plays you will ever see. I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but it's rare you will see a drop where it only hits a player's chest, not even their hands. But that's what happened right there. Quite bizarre, absolutely. Something you do not see very often. And again, that took 4 points off the board potentially. I think that there's a real chance that he's able to pick up the first down right there and maybe get a touchdown later. Maybe not. It's hard to tell, but at least 50-50 they get the first down right there. So it potentially took points off the board for sure. Later on, still in this first half, they would actually get another opportunity to try and score some points. They got the ball in the red zone yet again. So, okay, you weren't able to score a touchdown the last 2 times. Let's see if they can take advantage this time, and the answer is going to be no. What's going to happen is that really the left tackle right there, he's going to do he's not going to win his matchup straight up. I mean, watch how quickly there is pressure right here. Defensive end goes to the inside. Carr is completely flustered, and he has to just run outside the pocket and flip the ball away to guarantee they get 3 points because there was only 9 seconds left on the play clock, on the game clock before this play. So really, I mean, he had no time. He had to just get rid of the ball. Actually, a pretty good play by Carr to preserve some time. But again, those missed opportunities, oftentimes in the red zone, it really does help to have a number 1 guy. And that's really what went wrong for the Jaguars, for the Raiders against the Jaguars, I think. And one more thing that really was a huge problem was, honestly, Carr was under pressure all game. This was the worst game for the Oakland tackles of the season. Really did not work out well. I mean, watch this play where there's going to be one one-on-one matchup, and on the other side of the ball, it's actually a double team, but it's a double team with a tight end and with a halfback, so not quite truly a double team, but watch how just both of those Jaguars, it's going to be Allen and Ngakoue. Watch how they both just easily win their matchups, and Carr's in trouble on both sides, and he gets taken down. And that was really the story of that game, was Carr just did not have time to throw the ball. So, I mean, that's really how they lost against the Jaguars, and that's how they lost all of those games. So I've definitely gone over a lot, but I think the question still remains. Is Derek Carr good? I mean, he does some things well, really good at those short throws, really good at a deep ball, has a pretty decent football IQ, and pretty solid footwork. He does some things poorly as well, those mid-range throws, definitely not great. So, not a perfect quarterback, but not terrible either. However, is Derek Carr good? I mean, it's kind of hard to say, He's kind of that, he's not good enough that you can say definitely he is going to win us a Super Bowl, but he's not bad enough that you should be looking to find a replacement either. He's kind of in that range. I mean, the grass is always greener, as they say. And you know that story actually behind the grass is greener? It's actually quite dark, where the story goes there's 3 goats, and there's a river in the middle, and there's 2 patches of grass on the side. So they're on one side, and they're eating some grass, and they look over, and the grass just looks so much greener on the other side. It looks so plentiful and so delicious, and they really want to get over to that other side. And so they look around, and they find a bridge, so they walk up, start to go over the bridge, but as they do that, a troll pops up, and the troll says, "Hey, you have to answer a trivia question, and if you don't, I'm going to eat you." So the first goat goes up, he answers it wrong, gets eaten. The second goat goes up, he also answers it wrong and gets eaten. The third goat finally goes up, but answers the question right, so he's able to move on and get past the river. And once he does, he looks over, he starts eating the grass, realizes it tastes the exact same. Then he looks around and realizes that it actually looks the exact same. He then looks over to the other side and realizes that the only reason the grass looked greener was simply just because of the way the light was shining on the grass, and now the grass looks greener on the other side. So it's kind of like that with Derek Carr. You know, you could try to go over and you could try to see if you can get better grass, but the grass might not even be greener on the other side, and you might get eaten along the way. You might end up with no quarterback. So, you know, could you maybe end up getting to the other side and finding an apple tree or something? Perhaps, but you also could definitely end up really just shooting yourself in the foot. There's also one more story I want to leave you with. And I think this is actually a very interesting one because, you know, it seems like Derek Carr, he's going to attract some haters no matter what. And there's always a story that makes me think of that. Basically, there's a father and his son who are taking a donkey into town. And so the father first says, okay, you know, I'll let my son ride on a donkey. I'll just walk alongside it. Seems pretty simple. Town's not too far away. You know, it'll take us maybe half a day to get there. We'll get back by sundown. So we'll just start heading out now. And as they're going, they see a couple people that pass him. And they're like, man, can you believe that? You know, back when I was a kid, no way would my dad let me ride on a donkey while I do all the hard work. Absolutely no chance. And so, you know, the dad says, well, okay, I mean, maybe they have a point there. So, you know, I'll get on a donkey. I'll have my kid do some work. You know, it'll be good for him. So they switch off. And now the son is walking. The dad is on a donkey. They cross another couple of people a little bit later on. And they talk to each other and clearly loudly so the father can hear him. They say, can you believe that guy? I mean, man, you're sitting on a donkey, letting him take you into town while you make your kid do all the hard work. I mean, how selfish can you be? The father says, okay, well, you know, that makes some sense too. I don't want to be selfish. So instead, let's just both walk along with the donkey. We'll all walk there together. We'll all do the work. So then another person walks by and he shouts out at them, man, how stupid can you guys be? You have a perfectly good donkey right there. One of you could ride on, and yet you're both just walking alongside it. So now the father is like, all right, well, also a fair point. I mean, we have a donkey here. Let's just both get on the donkey. Let's just both ride a donkey. So they both get on the donkey, and a little bit later on, the donkey collapses because it just cannot take both of them. Basically, the moral of this story is that you can never please everybody. So there's going to be somebody who says that what you're doing is wrong. I think there's some people that have fair criticisms for Derek Carr. There is a valid criticism for Derek Carr. But as a whole, I think he does enough well that I think he is very much a worthy quarterback of being a franchise guy. He's not actually getting paid that much. I mean, I believe he's getting paid. He's not even in the top 20 NFL contracts at this time. Yes, he was number one when he first got a contract, but a lot of time has passed, and right now the Bears are paying more for Khalil Mack than the Raiders are paying for Derek Carr. So it's not actually as bad as some people make it out to be. I like Derek Carr. I think he's a good quarterback, and you know that's why I made a whole very long video about it. So let me know what you guys think. Do you agree? Do you think Derek Carr is a good quarterback? What did you think of this style of video? If you liked it, I might make some more. I did have fun making it. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.